Homelessness in America just shattered records. 771,000 people with nowhere to go. But here is what the headlines are hiding. Billions in federal funding are about to disappear. Shelters are closing their doors, and certain cities are headed for total collapse. Today, we are revealing 10 U.S. cities where homelessness will explode in 2026, and your neighborhood could be next. Coming in at number 10, we have Austin, Texas. Austin was sold as the affordable alternative to California. For years, tech workers fled Silicon Valley and flooded into Austin chasing lower taxes and cheaper rent. Startups boomed, the music scene thrived, and the city promised opportunity for everyone willing to make the move. But the reality on the ground tells a very different story. The Ending Community Homelessness Coalition served more than 28,000 people last year across Travis County. That is up from nearly 25,000 the year before. Emergency shelter beds have increased by 70% since 2022, yet the city still cannot keep pace with demand. The Marshalling Yard Emergency Shelter filled its 200 beds in under a month. Families are waiting 8 weeks just to get into shelter. And once they are inside, affordable housing is so scarce they cannot move out. Walk through downtown Austin today, and you will feel the tension building. Governor Greg Abbott recently launched state-led sweeps, clearing 48 encampments and collecting over 3,000 pounds of debris. State troopers arrested 31 people. They seized methamphetamine, cocaine, and firearms. The headlines called it a victory for public safety. But city officials tell a different story. They warn that clearing camps without housing people just moves the problem somewhere else. Into your neighborhood, into your local park, onto the sidewalk in front of your business. One city crew arrived to clear an encampment only to find state troopers had shown up randomly and disrupted months of outreach work. The left hand does not know what the right hand is doing, and when coordination breaks down, homelessness spreads like a virus. For homeowners in Austin, this is not some abstract policy debate. Property values in areas where encampments have spread are already declining. Homeowners are watching their equity evaporate as tents appear in local parks and underpasses. One neighborhood that never dealt with homelessness is now seeing people sleeping in cars on residential streets every night. Austin has issued nearly 1,300 citations for camping ban violations since 2021. But finding people who cannot afford rent does not get them housed. It makes them harder to track, harder to help, and more likely to end up in your backyard. The affordable Austin dream is over. And if you own property there, your investment is already at risk. At number 9, Denver, Colorado. Denver promised to end unsheltered homelessness by 2027. Mayor Mike Johnston launched the All-In Mile High initiative, celebrated moving over 2,000 people from encampments into city-owned hotels and tiny homes, and claimed the city had achieved the largest multi-year reduction in unsheltered homelessness in American history. The sidewalks downtown are cleaner. The tent cities are gone. Politicians are taking victory laps. But the celebration may be dangerously premature. Here is what they are not telling you. Overall homelessness in Denver actually increased 7% this year, reaching 10,774 people. Chronic homelessness rose from 1,698 people in 2023 to 2,118 in 2025. And the city is now closing shelters, not opening them. The Comfort Inn shelter on Quebec Street is shutting down. The Monroe Village tiny home communities are closing. The city says it will save $11 million per year. But advocates warn that 47% of people brought into hotel shelters experienced unknown or negative outcomes: death, jail, or a return to the streets. Meanwhile, eviction cases in Denver County Court are soaring. More people than at any time in 20 years are being evicted from their homes. Permit applications for new housing units slowed to just 379 in the first quarter of this year, down from a peak of 7,000 in 2021. The pipeline of new affordable housing has essentially stopped. Here is the math that should terrify every property owner in Denver. For every 10 homeless people getting into housing, 19 more are becoming homeless. The city is running on a treadmill that is speeding up while they are slowing down. Denver cleared the encampments from downtown, but homelessness is appearing in neighborhoods that never dealt with it before. Property owners on the west side are watching home values drop as displaced people move into residential areas. Business owners on South Broadway report constant drug use outside their stores. Meth, fentanyl, you name it. One shop owner said the situation has not improved despite years of promises and billions in spending. Denver is running out of both money and solutions. And if you think the problem is solved because the tents are gone from downtown, you are not paying attention to what is happening in the neighborhoods. Now at number 8, San Francisco, California. San Francisco spends more per homeless person than almost any city in America. For the 2024 to 2025 fiscal year, the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing was allocated $846.3 million. That is nearly $1 billion for a single city department focused on a single issue. And homelessness is still everywhere you look. About 8,300 people are experiencing homelessness in San Francisco. More than half are unsheltered, sleeping in parks, on sidewalks, in doorways, or in cars. The city has only 3,228 shelter beds, and they are almost always full. Just 13% of people staying in shelters exit into permanent housing. The rest cycle through the system endlessly, costing taxpayers more and more each year. Now federal funding is under attack in ways that could devastate the entire system. One local organization estimates San Francisco could lose $38.3 million in federal homeless services funding under new HUD policy changes. The Department of Housing and Urban Development has more than 100 active grants, with San Francisco worth about $326 million, and staffing cuts of nearly 50% could delay payments indefinitely. With no one left to process grants, money simply will not flow. Projects will stall. Services will collapse. The city is also juggling a $782 million budget deficit. Mayor Daniel Lurie originally proposed cutting homelessness prevention programs and shifting money to temporary shelter, then walked it back after public outcry from advocates who warned the plan would actually increase homelessness. But the structural problems remain. The budget is broken. For property owners and business owners, this is already hitting home values and bottom lines. Tenderloin storefronts sit empty behind metal grates. Tourism has not recovered to pre-pandemic levels. Convention business has cratered. Residents and business owners report open drug use outside their doors daily. Tech workers who once crowded the cafes now work from home in other states. San Francisco proves that spending money is not the same as solving problems. The city has thrown nearly $1 billion a year at homelessness and watched the situation stay the same or get worse. And when federal funding disappears, the crisis will accelerate faster than anyone is prepared for. Number 7 takes us to Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix was the Sunbelt success story that real estate agents sold to millions of Americans fleeing expensive coastal cities. Affordable housing, booming population, endless sunshine, no state income tax. The promise of a better life at half the cost. But the sun is setting on that dream. And the numbers reveal a crisis that is about to explode. The 2025 point-in-time count found 9,734 homeless people across Maricopa County, a 3% overall increase from the year before. But here's the alarming number they buried in the press release. Unsheltered homelessness spiked 28% as the number of people in shelters fell. For the first time, more than half of those experiencing homelessness in Maricopa County are now unsheltered, living on the streets, in parks, in cars, in places not meant for human habitation. Why the sudden spike? More than 1,000. Shelter beds disappeared last year when pandemic-era federal funding expired. The money ran out, the beds closed, and people ended up on the street. Arizona also had a record 106,587 eviction court filings in 2024, the highest number of eviction notices ever recorded in state history. Working families who thought they had stable housing are losing their homes at record rates. 2 years ago, Phoenix cleared out the zone, a massive downtown encampment that had become a symbol of the city's failure. Officials declared victory. Property owners near the Human Services campus celebrated. The headlines proclaimed that Phoenix had solved its problem. But a new investigation reveals the truth. Homelessness has intensified since the zone was cleared, with the unsheltered population rising nearly 40% in the last year, as people relocated throughout the city and into surrounding suburbs. The problem was not solved, it was scattered. Neighborhoods that never saw a single encampment are now dealing with them regularly. Now, federal funding cuts threaten to make everything worse. Maricopa County could lose $32 million in federal assistance, and nearly 1,400 housing units under new HUD policy changes. One expert who works directly with the homeless population predicts the cuts could result in between 3,500 and 5,000 more people living on Phoenix streets by February of next year. Property values are already dropping in areas where displaced people have moved. Home prices in central Phoenix neighborhoods have fallen noticeably as the zone spread out. The promise of affordable Arizona living is crumbling, and anyone who bought property there in the last few years is watching their investment deteriorate. Isn't it strange how cities keep promising they have solved homelessness, yet every time you look, the numbers keep going up? What do you think they are actually doing with all that taxpayer money? Drop your thoughts in the comments. At number 6, Chicago, Illinois. Chicago's homelessness crisis did not just grow. It exploded in a way that shocked even veteran housing advocates. The city estimated 18,836 people experienced homelessness last year, compared with 6,139 in 2023. That is more than tripled in a single year. No major American city has ever seen such a rapid increase. The driver was the arrival of nearly 50,000 asylum seekers, many bused from the southern border by Texas Governor Greg Abbott. At its peak, Chicago was spending $1.4 million per day to care for nearly 15,000 migrants in 27 shelters across the city. The city has now spent more than $540 million on housing and caring for asylum seekers since August of 2022. That is over $500 million that was never in the budget. Chicago responded by merging its migrant shelters with its traditional homeless shelters into what they call the One System Initiative. Starting January 1st, 2025, anyone experiencing homelessness, whether a longtime Chicago resident or a newly arrived asylum seeker, uses the same system. It sounds fair on paper, but here is the problem that city officials admitted in their own press conference. The existing 3,000 beds for longtime homeless Chicagoans were already 97 to 98% full before a single migrant arrived. Adding thousands of asylum seekers to the same system means there is simply not enough room for everyone. Mayor Brandon Johnson acknowledged the math does not work. Could this lead to people on the street? Look, I will be remiss if I did not acknowledge the financial straits that we are experiencing right now. That is the mayor admitting that his own policy could increase street homelessness. Chicago is facing a projected budget gap of $982 million in 2025. The city tried to pass the Bring Chicago Home referendum to raise real estate transfer taxes on high-end property sales to fund homelessness services. It failed by a wide margin. Voters said no. The money is not coming. For property owners, the fallout is real and spreading. Neighborhoods like Pilsen, Woodlawn, Galewood, and Kenwood have seen heated debates about shelters opening nearby. Community meetings turned into shouting matches. Property values near shelters have softened. When your alderman is fighting to close shelters in your ward, when neighbors are organizing against housing for the homeless, you know the system is breaking down. The Chicago Coalition that tracks homelessness estimates that 76,375 Chicagoans experienced homelessness throughout 2024. Not on a single night, but over the course of the entire year. If you include people couch surfing and doubled up with relatives, the true scale of housing instability is staggering. Are you watching what happens to your property value? If this helps you understand what is really happening in the economy, hit subscribe. It is free and it means you will never miss these breakdowns. Most people have no idea how close their city is to collapse. The numbers are worse than the headlines suggest. Stick around. The next one might be where you live, and the risks are only getting bigger. Moving on to number 5, Seattle, Washington. Seattle has the nation's second largest unsheltered homeless population. Despite being one of the wealthiest cities in America, home to Amazon and Microsoft, Seattle has failed to house its own residents. And despite spending $85 million on encampment sweeps during Mayor Bruce Harrell's term, the problem is not going away. It is just moving around. From January 2022 to June 2025, Seattle's Unified Care Team carried out 6,800 sweeps, an average of more than 5 per day, more than under his 4 mayoral predecessors combined. Approximately 85% of sweeps are categorized as obstructions, requiring no prior notice before crews show up to remove tents and belongings. The city reports a 72% reduction in observed tents since 2022. Politicians celebrate the cleaner sidewalks, but residents are reporting encampments in record numbers. The Find It Fix It app is flooded with complaints. The sweeps are just moving people from one location to another, and often from downtown into residential neighborhoods that never dealt with homelessness before. The state of Washington reported that 158,791 people were living in emergency shelters or unhoused in January 2025. That is a 2.2% increase from the year before. The population of people living outside or in emergency shelter has been marching steadily upward for years. Here is what should worry every property owner in the Seattle metro area. HUD data shows that between 2020 and 2024, the Seattle region saw no effective increase in the number of year-round shelter beds. The city has not actually built more capacity to house people. It has just shuffled them from one location to another and called it progress. Outreach workers report that people are falling into homelessness for the first time because of the prohibitive cost of living in Seattle. Minimum wage workers cannot afford rent. Social safety nets have not kept up since pandemic-era federal funding expired. And the pipeline of new housing has essentially stopped. Permit applications for new units dropped to just 379 in the first quarter, compared with a peak of 7,000 in 2021. Seattle's approach is spending tens of millions to make homelessness less visible without actually solving it. The sweeps continue, the people relocate, and property owners in neighborhoods across the city are watching encampments appear in places where they never existed before. How long before it reaches your street? Number 4 brings us to Las Vegas, Nevada. Las Vegas built its entire economy on one thing: tourism. When people visit, money flows. When tourism slows, everything collapses. And that vulnerability makes Las Vegas one of the most dangerous housing markets in America for anyone worried about homelessness affecting their property value. Nevada's unemployment rate has consistently run higher than the national average. During economic downturns, Las Vegas gets hit first and hardest. During the 2008 financial crisis, 19% of homeowners in the Las Vegas metro area were underwater, owing more than their homes were worth. Foreclosure signs dotted entire neighborhoods. Empty houses sat abandoned. Property values crashed by 60% in some areas. The homeless population in Las Vegas continues to grow despite aggressive enforcement. The city has implemented laws against sleeping in public spaces. But without housing, people cannot afford. Enforcement just creates a game of musical chairs. Police clear one encampment, and it pops up somewhere else. The problem moves. It never disappears. Here is the financial risk that every Las Vegas property owner needs to understand. Home values in Las Vegas are still recovering from the last crash. Another economic shock, whether a recession, a drop in tourism due to changing consumer habits, or federal funding cuts to housing assistance, could send property values plummeting again. And this time, homelessness will be worse, because the social safety net is weaker than it was in 2008. The median income in Las Vegas has not kept pace with rising rents. Working families, the food and beverage workers, the hotel housekeepers, the casino, dealers who form the backbone of the Vegas economy, are increasingly cost-burdened. Many are spending more than 50% of their income on rent. One layoff, one medical emergency, one unexpected expense, and they are on the street. Encampments have spread from the famous Strip area into residential neighborhoods. Homeowners are reporting tents in local parks, people sleeping in cars on their streets, and increased property crime. The Las Vegas promise of affordable desert living is colliding with economic reality. If you own property in Las Vegas, your investment is tied to an economy that can collapse overnight when tourists stop coming. And when they stop coming, homelessness explodes. The irony is brutal. Las Vegas was marketed as the affordable alternative to California. Lower housing costs, no state income tax, warm weather year-round. Retirees moved their savings there. Families relocated for what they thought would be a better life. But nobody told them they were buying into an economy with no safety net. When the next recession hits, Las Vegas will feel it first and worst. But that is nothing compared to what is coming. The next cities on this list are facing complete financial collapse. Federal funding is disappearing. Shelters are closing. And number one might be the most shocking of all, because it affects more Americans than any other city in the country. At number 3, Los Angeles, California. Los Angeles has 72,308 people experiencing homelessness. Even after 2 consecutive years of reported declines, that is still nearly a quarter of the entire nation's homeless population, concentrated in a single county. To put that in perspective, LA County alone has more homeless people than the entire states of Texas, Florida, and Arizona combined. The city has spent more than $320 million on its Inside Safe encampment resolution program over the last 3 years. The program has brought 5,200 people indoors. About 1/4 found permanent housing, but more than a third are back on the streets. The rest remain in temporary hotel rooms, cycling through a system with no clear exit. Here's the betrayal that should outrage every Los Angeles taxpayer. County Supervisor Lindsay Horvath calculated that at the current pace, it would take 3 centuries to end homelessness in LA County. 300 years. The progress being celebrated in press conferences is barely making a dent in a crisis that grows faster than interventions can keep up. Federal funding cuts could erase even that minimal progress. California is at risk of losing hundreds of millions in federal homelessness funding under new HUD policy changes that prioritize transitional housing with work requirements over permanent supportive housing. The programs that have actually worked in LA, the ones that house people first and provide services after, are exactly the programs being defunded. RAND. Corporation research has already cast doubt on the accuracy of LA's homeless counts, suggesting the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority systematically undercounted homelessness in some parts of the city during the 2024 count. The agency removed more volunteer observations when reconciling data than in previous years. The real numbers may be far worse than what officials report. For property owners throughout Los Angeles County, this means tent cities will continue appearing in new neighborhoods. Even areas like Hollywood, which reported a 49% drop in street homelessness, still have ongoing encampments that never fully clear. Venice, Skid Row, Echo Park, the names change, but the crisis never ends. It just moves from one neighborhood to another while property values suffer. Why do you think the cities that spend the most money on homelessness keep seeing the numbers go up? Is it bad policy, mismanagement of funds, or something they do not want taxpayers to know? Let me know what you think in the comments. Number 2 on our list is Boston, Massachusetts. Massachusetts saw a 53.4% increase in homelessness from 2023 to 2024, one of the fastest increases in the nation. The state's centralized shelter placement system, which was supposed to efficiently match people with available beds, has been overwhelmed by asylum seekers distributed across multiple jurisdictions. Boston is facing the same perfect storm as Chicago and New York. Migrants arriving with nowhere to go, existing shelter systems already at capacity, and federal funding under threat. The state's permanent supportive housing inventory is not keeping pace with need. Massachusetts lags behind California and other large states in rapid rehousing beds. The short-term assistance that helps people quickly find apartments, the infrastructure to move people from shelters to permanent housing simply does not exist at the scale needed. For property owners in Greater Boston, this means continued pressure on housing costs, neighborhood conflicts over shelter placement, and potential property value impacts as homelessness spreads into suburban communities that have never experienced it before. The NIMBY fights are getting uglier. Town meetings are becoming battlegrounds. Boston's tech-driven economy was supposed to create prosperity for everyone. Biotech companies, universities, hospitals. The city has every advantage. Instead, sky-high rents have pushed working families to the breaking point. A one-bedroom apartment in Boston now costs more than $3,000 per month. Working people with jobs cannot afford to live there. 1 in every 3 people experiencing homelessness in the Boston area had a job in the past year. Employment is no longer protection from the streets. You can work full-time and still end up homeless. That reality is reshaping how people think about stability in Boston, and it should reshape how property owners think about their investments. The suburban towns surrounding Boston are starting to see encampments and homeless individuals for the first time. The crisis is spreading outward from the city center into communities that thought they were insulated. Nobody is insulated anymore. The state is bracing for federal funding cuts that could make everything worse. Massachusetts relies heavily on HUD funding for its shelter and housing programs. If those dollars disappear, and all signs suggest they will, the state will be forced to choose between cutting services and raising taxes on property owners. Either way, you pay. Is your city next on this list? And now, the #1 city where homelessness is going to explode. New York City, New York. New York City has the largest homeless population in America. And despite all the money spent, despite all the programs launched, despite the right to shelter guarantee, it is getting dramatically worse. On any given night, roughly 125,000 people sleep in shelters across New York City. Thousands more bed down on the streets, in subway stations, and in abandoned buildings. Over 200,000 people are doubled or tripled up in overcrowded apartments, sleeping on couches and floors because they have nowhere else to go. They are not counted as homeless in official statistics, but they are one argument, one eviction, one crisis away from the shelter system. More than 156,000 New York City schoolchildren experienced homelessness at some point during the 2024 to 2025 school year, representing 1 in 8 children attending city schools. 1 in 8. These are children trying to learn while they do not know where they will sleep tonight. Homelessness in New York more than doubled between January 2022 and January 2024. It grew by 53.1% from January 2023 to January 2024 alone, more than 4 times the rate of the rest of the nation. New York City accounted for 93% of the increase in the entire state's homeless population. Here is what the mayor does not want you to focus on. The number of longer-term New Yorkers in shelters, not counting new arrivals and asylum seekers, grew by more than 7,500 people in 2024 alone, a 12% increase. This means the crisis is homegrown, not just driven by migration. Regular New Yorkers are falling into homelessness faster than the system can catch them. The financial catastrophe waiting to happen is structural. New York City has a right to shelter mandate, meaning the city must provide beds for everyone who requests one. The average length of stay in the shelter system is 412 days for single adults, more than a year. For families with children, it is 437 days. For adult families, it is 750 days. More than 2 years living in shelter, because they cannot find housing they can afford. The city is spending billions, and the problem is getting worse. Between 1996 and 2017, New York City lost 1.1 million units of affordable housing to condo conversions, luxury development, and rent increases. The vacancy rate for affordable apartments is less than 1%. Essentially 0 available units. 1/3 of all renters pay more than half their income toward rent. They are 1 paycheck away from disaster. Federal funding cuts under new HUD policies could strip away permanent supportive housing for tens of thousands of disabled and formerly homeless New Yorkers. Proposed policy changes would prohibit non-citizens and mixed-status families from receiving federal housing assistance, potentially causing hundreds of thousands more to lose their homes. For property owners anywhere in New York, your investment is tied to a city that cannot house its own people. Every neighborhood is affected. Every community district in the city contributes people to the homeless population. There is no neighborhood immune from this crisis. No zip code where you can hide from what is coming. New York City is ground zero for the homelessness explosion of 2026. And if you think your property is safe because you live in a nice neighborhood, you are not paying attention to where this is headed. Not all cities are created equal. Some are about to put your financial future at serious risk. The federal funding cuts are coming, shelters are closing, and the cities that promise solutions are failing. If this breakdown helped you understand the risks, subscribe now. And if you are watching on TV, tap your remote so you never get blindsided again.